I didn't take the Vatican job because I love Rome or history or saints. I took it because a man has to pay for his sister's chemo and my contracting gigs in D.C. had dried up. The posting was 3 lines long and stubbornly boring. Discreet security personnel needed. Night shift. Exceptional pay. No branding, no crest, no Latin motto. The inbox pinged me back with an address just inside the walls and a time, 2100. Come alone, business casual. Bring identification. The guard at the Porta Santana looked at my passport like it was charming, then handed it back as if it were a child's drawing and waved me through. There's a particular quiet inside the Vatican at night. Traffic a rumor, fountains doing most of the talking. It felt like being backstage in a theater right before curtain. Everything set, nobody seated. I met Father Moro in a stone corridor that smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper. He was barrel-chested, Boston accent hiding under the vowels of Italian clergy, and he poured coffee like a man who trusted caffeine more than prayer. "You Miles Carter?" he asked, not looking up from a clipboard. "Yes, Father. Army MP 6 years. DIA security contractor 2. One incident report you didn't write but you should have." His eyes flicked up. "We like people who learn faster the second time." "I learned fast the first time," I said. "We will see." He slid a leather folio across the table. Good leather, the kind that starts with a promise and ends with a will. "Read what's inside," he said, out loud. Inside were 5 pages, heavy stock, edges trimmed clean, each line said in English and Latin, then in scripts I didn't want to stare at too long. "Rule 1, I read. Never look directly at a guest's face. Eyes to hands or feet only." "Again," he said. I read it again. He nodded at the brand new mechanical pencil by my elbow. "Write it." I wrote it out, my block letters suddenly a kid's again. "Rule 2, I continued. "Always announce yourself before entering any room. Wait for acknowledgement." He said nothing. I kept going. "Rule 3, maintain 2 meters distance at all times. No physical contact. 2 yards is fine," he said. "We're not measuring with a tape, but don't make me explain why we don't round down." "Rule 4, speak only when spoken to. Answer yes or no if possible." "American culture loves to fill silence," he said. "Tonight, silence will love you back if you let it." "Rule 5, I read. Never turn your back on more than 1 guest at a time. Count constantly." He tapped the page. "Count out loud if you have to, whisper. I don't care if you sing it under your breath to the tune of Take Me Out to the Ball Game. I care that you don't lose count." I looked up. "Do people lose count?" "They stop being people when they do," he said. It wasn't a threat. It was a weather report. He had me read the 5 rules again, this time alternating with the Latin. I got 2 pronunciations wrong. He corrected me with the tenderness of a teacher and the speed of someone who needed me to understand right now. When we finished, he slid the folio back toward me. "Sign." He pointed to a line that said "I have read and will obey" in both languages, and a third that made my scalp tighten. I signed. My hand didn't shake. I was proud of that. "Your post is the East Corridor," he said, "between the main hall and the administrative wing. Midnight to 4. You will be visible but unimportant. Be exactly both." "What happens if someone needs the restroom?" I asked, because Americans ask about bathrooms when we don't know the real question. "You will announce yourself. They will acknowledge or they will not. If they do not, you will stay where you are. And if they talk to me, you will answer yes or no. Most of them don't enjoy small talk." He slid a shortwave radio across the table, then a notebook with a grid printed on every page. "Times on the left, Corridors on the top. Make excess when you pass. Make notes if anything deviates. Your handwriting will matter to people who will never meet you. And if something goes wrong, I asked. You'll know, he said. The corridor looked simple on the map. In person, it was the kind of simple that takes years to get right. White walls, dark wood doors with modest plaques, a crucifix every 40 feet as if to encourage a tired soul to keep walking. The marble floor had dark veining, lines that made natural lanes you couldn't help but follow. I liked that. I get along with lanes. At 23:50 the building seemed to inhale. I checked my watch, cheap Casio, indestructible, and clicked the radio test like we'd drilled. Post east check. Copy, Father Morrow said, close enough on the frequency to make it feel like he was standing around the corner. Last chance for questions, Carter. I almost asked if I should expect anything, but I'd learned in rooms like this you ask the question you can act on. If something knocks, I said, and nothing is there, do I open? No, copy. Drink your coffee, he said. They appreciate punctuality. Midnight pinched the corridor like a zipper. Somewhere a door opened and the air changed temperature by a degree I couldn't measure, but my skin did. The first sound wasn't footsteps. It was fabric, wool brushing wool, silk sliding, something heavier that ate its own friction. Then the gate. You learn a lot about a person by their feet. I don't mean their shoes, though shoes tell on us too. I mean the way they decide to keep a promise to gravity. The first pair I saw belonged to someone who loved polished leather. Black cap-toe Oxfords, mirror shine, laces like piano wire. They moved without hurrying. They moved like they'd told time what to do for a long while. Good evening, I said, because Rule 4 didn't forbid courtesy, it forbade conversation. My voice sounded like the hall, low, serious, unafraid. No reply, that was fine. The next pair made no sound at all. Not the quiet of soft soles, the absence of footsteps, like when you remember a word without saying it. The shoes looked like boots, but the ankle flex didn't match the silhouette. I focused on the floor, the pattern radiating out from my polished black shoes, the veining like river deltas. I announced each group as they passed. Security present. Security East Corridor. Sometimes the radio hissed softly when I did, as if it approved. At 0017 something shuffled. Not human. Humans drag like they resent it. This was utilitarian dragging, like someone moving a piece that wasn't heavy, just indifferent. Bare feet with thickened nails tapped stone. Click, 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 not in a rhythm I recognized. I kept counting under my breath. 1 pair, 2, 3. A fourth that didn't click so much as skitter. My throat wanted to go dry. I sipped coffee. Security present, I said. Permission to remain in corridor. Yes, a voice said from slightly above where a face would be. It sounded like a baritone sung into a bottle, contained, resonant, looking for a room to fill. Thank you, I said. Then, 4, under my breath, because I had nearly forgotten to count, and Rule 5 is a blade that doesn't look like a blade until you feel it. A set of sandals came next. Not beach sandals. Something older, straps wound up calves and tied high like they were pretending to be modern. The leather had a faint sheen, like it had been oiled with something that didn't come from olives. As the wearer passed, a smell touched the air, not sulfur, ozone, like the first breath right after a storm cracks open winter. My arm hair stood up. My feet stayed still. When I wrote my first incident note, it looked like any mid-level manager's list. 0019, ozone odor noted. Sandaled guest. No deviation. That felt like safety, putting fear into nouns, verbs, punctuation. 0033. A door at the end of the corridor whispered shut. I hadn't seen it open. My pencil hovered, wanting to write door moved unobserved, but what I wrote was door closed. If you've worked security, you know the difference between absolutes and useful records. I stayed at my post and checked my lanes. The veining of the stone under my toes told me exactly where to place my weight so the seam didn't squeak. I liked that even more. At 0047, someone stopped. Polished leather Oxfords. I could see the machine-stitched welt, the faint scratch nobody but me would ever notice, a crescent arc like a half-moon near the left toe. The shoes stood perfectly parallel, heels together. My shoulder blades slid a millimeter toward each other, the body's quiet armor. Security, I said. Present. Reliable, the shoes said in a perfect Chicago accent. We appreciate reliable. Thank you, I said, because the rules didn't forbid truth. It or he stood there a full 5 heartbeats, mine, not his. I couldn't hear his, then walked on. The radio crackled, then quieted like someone who'd set it down and remembered to breathe. At 0110, I had my first urge to cheat, not much. Nothing dramatic, just a head tilt. A tiny one, a kid listening outside a classroom door. On the other side of the nearest door, a chorus murmured in a dozen vowels, the consonants occasionally clicking together like rosary beads. The urge was to know. Curiosity dresses like competence when you're tired. I put my hand in my pocket and counted the edges of the coin there, a habit from long patrols. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I pulled my hand out, the coin was warm. Stay with me, I told myself. Hands and feet. Announce. Count. At 0136, the elevator moved. No one pushed the button, but the arrow dinged and the carriage rose from the basement to the ground floor with the rhythm of a metronome. Doors opened. Nothing stepped out. Doors closed. The arrow dinged again. Up 1, 2, 3 floors. The panel above the doors had the old Roman numerals. It stopped at Roman 3, then at something past it. No numeral, just the faintest pulse of light where nothing should be. Post east, I said into the radio. Elevator movement with no visible passengers, stopping at unlisted level. Silence. Then Father Morrow noted maintain position. Copy. I drew a small square in my notebook where the unlisted level would be if my paper grid matched the building. I shaded it in. The pencil left a gray the exact shade of the sky before thunder. At 0202, I met my first voice. Most of the guests didn't speak to me. The ones that did generally asked for nothing and expected less. This one waited at the water fountain where the brass guard had been polished by centuries of thirst. Security present, I said. Acknowledged, the voice said. It contained 2 tones, one a human tenor, the other a note I felt in my teeth like a tuning fork. Remain. I remained. It leaned down to drink. I watched its hands, because rules are blankets and I was cold. Long finger bones inside gloves that didn't crinkle like latex or leather. The gloves didn't fold. They maintained a perfect surface tension, as if they were the idea of a material, not a material itself. Thank you, it said. Yes, I replied. My heart learned a new beat, 4 quick, 1 slow, 4 quick, 1 slow. I wrote it down in the margin. Later I would learn to ignore my body except when it kept score for me. At 0229 my radio died. No battery warning, no wheeze. It just stopped as if a hand cupped the signal and carried it away. I looked at the lantern clipped to my belt, the backup for when backups fail, and resisted the American urge to troubleshoot. The rules say keep your lanes, keep your count. 0310, the floor cooled. The marble under my shoes went from room temperature to basement in a breath, and condensation crawled up the walls like shy ivy. One of the barefoot guests walked past, and the moisture did something I've only ever seen twice. It retreated from its skin like it was embarrassed. It left a dry halo where water refused to touch. 0341. A door opened at the end of the corridor without sound. A draft came first, clean and dry, as if the room had been sealed for a century and had thought better of it. Sandals again. The straps were the same, but the pattern at the edge of the sole had changed, a motif like wheat stalks bending in wind. I realized then that you could know a guest's mood by their shoes the way you know a friend's by their shoulders. It felt intimate. It felt dangerous. Security, I said, softer this time. Present? Yes, the sandals said, warmer than the others. Good, good, the simplest word, a gift if you let it be. At 0358 the corridor exhaled what it had inhaled at midnight. The air softened. The marble came back to room temp. The building shook off a coat I hadn't seen and became itself again. The first to depart were the polished Oxfords. They paused half a step this time, like a nod you didn't hear. Incident code, the Chicago voice asked. No incident, I said, because as far as I was concerned, we'd reached dawn intact. Correct, he said, and moved on. The silent boots followed in formation. Then the sandals, then the barefoot pilgrims, clicking nails like a metronome counting down to coffee. When the last pair of feet faded into the sound of the city waking, delivery scooters, distant sirens, a bell doing its version of a yawn, my radio came back to life with a pop. Report, Father Morrow said. I read him the grid first, the boring part that matters. Times, passes, pauses. Then the elevator. Then the warm coin. I didn't mention the glove that wasn't a glove, not because I was hiding anything, because I didn't yet have the words to make that detail useful. Acceptable, he said. Meet me in the office. In the office, the coffee had the decency to taste like coffee. He listened the way good priests and good cops do, eyes on you, hands quiet, mind running fast but not ahead of your mouth. When I finished, he set his cup down and looked at my notebook. Your count, he said. Always say it out loud. I did, I said, under my breath. Louder, he said. When something tries to make you forget, let your own ears help you remember. He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. Inside, a badge that wasn't a badge, a raise that felt like cheating, and a new laminated card. What's this? I asked. Special protocols for rare nights, he said. Not tonight, but soon. He tapped the last line. If you smell sulfur or burning metal, evacuate, I read. Evacuate, he repeated. And don't be a hero. Heroes here get statues. We don't have room for more statues. I stood to go. He stopped me with a question he pretended was casual. You're American, he said. We find that helpful. How's that? You like rules when they are yours, he said, smiling like he'd said something impolite in a polite way. Tonight the rules are yours if you take them. I pocketed the folio, the badge, the raise. The coin in my other pocket had cooled. I didn't check the date, because I didn't want to know if it had changed. On my way out, I passed a window that looked into the garden. The glass was frosted from the condensation, but a shape moved beyond it, tall, patient, the outline of shoulders I didn't look at. On the lower edge of the pane, where someone's breath had cleared a thumb-sized circle, there was a print. Not a fingerprint. A whorl like the inside of a seashell, tight and satisfying and wrong. I did what I had been hired to do. I looked down. The garden path showed a neat line of soles where dew had parted, and at the end of the path over the gravel was a single set of polished Oxfords pointing toward the gate, heels together, waiting for what I didn't know. Security present, I said, to no one in particular. Somewhere in the building, a door I didn't open closed softly. I counted my way to the exit, my voice just above a whisper. 1, 2, 3, 4. I made it to 10. I didn't look back, not because of the rule, but because I didn't want to see that there was anything left to look at. Outside, Rome yawned itself into morning. A delivery truck rattled by. A woman on a scooter balanced a bag of oranges like a miracle. I dug the coin out of my pocket on instinct and finally looked. It was my mother's old Sacagawea dollar, the one she'd pressed into my palm before my first deployment. The date hadn't changed. Of course it hadn't. But the edge had an indent now, a tiny crescent, exactly like the half-moon scuff on the Chicago Oxfords. I slipped it back into my pocket. I didn't know if that was a blessing or a warning. I did know I'd be back tomorrow night and the night after and the night after that, because the rules were mine now, and because the work paid on time, and because when you've spent years guarding doors that open onto nothing, it is an odd relief to stand at one that opens onto something, even if the something is not for you. I slept until sunset, woke to the smell of coffee, and recited the rules in English and Latin while I laced my shoes. Never look at faces. Announce. No contact. Speak when spoken to. Count. Then I added one of my own, the kind of Americanism you say with a grin to make it less like a prayer. Don't get cute. I wasn't sure if God heard it. I was sure. I'd like to tell you the second night felt easier, that once you've memorized 5 rules in English and Latin, the hard part is over. But the truth is the second night is worse. The first time, you're too busy surviving. The second time, you know exactly what's coming. I showed up 20 minutes early, shoes shined like I was going to court. Father Morrow handed me the same folio like he didn't trust memory. Read them again. I did. This time he didn't correct my Latin. He just said, "You'll need consistency more than courage." By 11:55 I was in position in the East Corridor, notebook open, pencil sharp, coffee cooling at my side. I whispered the rules like cadence. Don't look at faces. Announce. No contact. Speak only when spoken to. Count. My Casio ticked over to 0000 and the air pressure changed. This time I braced. First came the shoes, expensive leather mirror shined. I recognized them instantly. They moved like they owned time. I announced, "Security present, permission to remain." Silence. Then a voice, perfect Midwestern English. "Reliability is rare, Miles." My heart hiccuped. Last night I hadn't given them my name. Either Father Morrow briefed them or the shoes didn't need briefing. I kept my eyes locked on the floor. "Thank you," I said, voice steady. They walked on. For the next hour I walked my lanes. Click, click, click of toenails. The sandals again, smelling faintly of ozone. Bare feet shuffling like they were dragging secrets across the marble. Every time I passed a crucifix, I whispered the number of guests under my breath. 12, 13, 14. The corridor was darker tonight, though the bulbs hadn't dimmed. Corners seemed longer. Doorways seemed narrower. My pencil wrote without my permission, angles shifting. At 01:42, I encountered one at the far end, standing by a window that looked over the gardens. Its feet were bare but wrong, 5 normal toes plus 2 smaller ones curving inward like hooks. "Security present," I said. It didn't move. Then a voice, accented but clear, acknowledged guard. "Thank you." The rules said eyes on feet, but my peripheral vision screamed that the shadow against the glass was taller than the frame. I counted out loud, 1 to keep from looking up. At 02:15, while checking my log, I noticed something that still chills me. On the page where I'd written times and notes, a new line had appeared in my handwriting. 02:16, count again. I hadn't written it. My pencil was still in my hand, but the letters matched my block script exactly. I whispered the count, 17, 18, forcing my pulse to stay steady. Nothing in the corridor moved, but the notebook felt heavier. At 03:00, I passed the water fountain again. The polished Oxfords were there, standing neatly together. Security present, I said. Reliable, the Chicago voice said. We approve of reliable. I didn't answer. Rule 4, speak only when spoken to. A pause, then, say yes. Yes. The shoes stepped aside. As they moved, I saw their reflection in the chrome fountain guard. Only there wasn't one, just empty corridor. At 04:00, the corridor exhaled. The guests filed out, sandals, bare feet, clicking nails, polished leather. I announced myself each time. My throat was raw from whisper counting. When the last group passed, I glanced down. My notebook was open to the same page, but the words had changed again. 02:16, count again. 19. I had counted 18. At dawn, Father Morrow asked for my report. I slid the notebook across. He read silently, lips pressed thin. When he reached the extra line, he tapped it once. You wrote this? No, I said. He closed the folio slowly, like it might bite. Then someone did. I frowned. But there was no one else. He looked past me, toward the corridor, and said, Exactly. They told me I'd be working alone. They lied. On my third month, Father Morrow met me in the East Corridor with a second leather folio. Behind him stood a kid, 25 at most, sharp haircut, overconfident stride. Name tag said Salvatore Romano, though he introduced himself with a grin and a handshake that lingered a second too long. Army, he asked me. Yeah, you. Carabinieri, 2 years. They said this was easy money. I glanced at Morrow. His jaw was tight. Read, the priest said, handing him the folio. Salvatore laughed after the second rule. Announce yourself. What is this theater? Read again, Morrow said. Louder. Salvatore rolled his eyes but did it. He never looked at me, never noticed the way Morrow's fingers trembled against his coffee cup. Midnight struck, the air shifted, and the corridor began to breathe again. I set my notebook open, counted under my breath. 1, 2. Salvatore leaned close. You really believe this crap? Vatican cosplay for rich lunatics. You'll believe it, I muttered, when you see what happens if you don't. He smirked. Relax, they're just old guys in costumes. At 00:43 we turned the corner near the water fountain. A guest stood there, motionless. Expensive robe hem brushing the marble, bare feet with 6 toes splayed across the stone. I stopped dead, whispered, Security present, permission to pass. The guest didn't answer, it just breathed, a sound like wind through broken glass. Salvatore stepped forward. Everything okay here? My stomach dropped, Rule 4 shattered. The guest turned its feet toward him, slowly, deliberately. Salvatore froze, his skin went white, his mouth opened but no sound came out. I did the only thing I could. I raised my voice, steady as a drill sergeant. Security present, 2 guards, requesting permission to continue patrol. The air thickened, pressing against my chest. Then finally the voice. Granted. The guest turned back to the fountain. I grabbed Salvatore's elbow and steered him away. His knees nearly buckled. For the rest of the shift he said almost nothing. His hands shook so hard he dropped his pencil twice trying to mark his notebook. When we finished, Father Morrow asked for our report. I handed mine over. Salvatore just stared at the floor. Transfer him, Morrow said quietly. Salvatore nodded. Day shift, please. "What did you see?" I asked him outside when he was packing his gear. He swallowed, eyes bloodshot. "The rules exist for good reasons." That was all he'd say. That night I worked alone again. At 03:12, passing the same fountain, I whispered the announcement out of habit. The guest was gone. The fountain's chrome surface gleamed empty. But in the reflection, for a split second, I saw Salvador's pale face, eyes wide, mouth open, staring back at me from a place he wasn't standing. I wrote it down in my logbook. Then I underlined Rule 4 twice. Every soldier learns the same thing. If you don't map the field will map you. And once it maps you, you're already buried. That thought kept repeating in my head as I walked the Vatican's East Corridor for the 4th month in a row, notebook clutched in my hand like a rifle. By now I knew the routine. Midnight to 4, the guests arrive, the rules keep me alive. But survival wasn't enough anymore. I wanted to understand. So I started keeping an inventory. At first it was simple logs, times, patrol routes, deviations. But soon the margins filled with sketches, soles, straps, nails, the outline of a boot. I assigned nicknames like a soldier marks terrain on a map. Polish, mirror-shined Oxfords, always first in, last out. Click, bare feet with long nails, tapping frantic Morse code. Strap, ancient sandals, ozone smell trailing them like a storm. Mute, soundless boots in military formation, swallowing echoes. I never wrote the word demon. Labels keep you sane. By my 5th month I could tell who was approaching by rhythm alone. Polish carried the calm authority of someone who owned time. Click scurried like paranoia in human form. Strap was measured, steady, always heralded by condensation on the walls. And mute terrified me most, the silence where noise should be. The corridor itself seemed to respond. One night I counted 58 paces between crucifixes. The next patrol 65, then back again. Buildings learn from who walks them, Father Morrow said later. This place adapts to its guests. Think of it as protocol written in stone. At 01:23 one night, the brass dial above the elevator ticked past its numbered stops. Doors opened. Inside was a full mirror, not polished paneling but antique glass. My reflection stood there. Same uniform, same notebook, but his eyes were lifted. Breaking Rule 1, he smiled. The doors closed. The elevator rose to a level that didn't exist. In my log 0123, reflection observed. Other me broke Rule 1. Rule 5 haunted me most. Count constantly. One night when mute passed, I whispered 14. Normally my voice came back faintly, but the corridor refused to echo. The silence ate my count. Later in my notebook the number appeared doubled, 1414. I hadn't written it that way. 03:33. The fountain near the east corridor, empty except for a puddle. I crouched. In the water's reflection I saw Strap's sandals dripping liquid that wasn't there. I blinked. Gone, but the marble under my hand was wet. I logged it, 03:33, residual presence. Inventory incomplete. That phrase stuck with me. No matter how thorough I was, something always slipped away. 3 days before the next meeting, Father Morrow called me in early. His office smelled of old wine and dust. This time he didn't pour coffee, he poured wine. Next gathering will be different, he said. Not all groups are cooperative. He handed me a laminated card, special protocols. Do not carry messages. If altercations occur, radio, do not intervene. If offered gifts, decline. If electrical fails, use lanterns only. If you smell sulfur or burning metal, evacuate. That last one clung to me like a shadow. 23:30 Polish arrived early. The Chicago voice paused at my post. Tonight may present challenges. Maintain your protocols. 0000 mute entered, boots silent. One stopped. You are the regular guard. Remain neutral. 00:15 a new group, barefoot, uneven, some running, some dragging. Before I could announce myself, one barked. Security presence noted. Stay clear of the eastern corridor tonight. Doors slammed. The storm outside screamed. Normally the hall muffles everything, not that night. 00:47 voices spilled out. Latin, German, something guttural I couldn't place. Anger sharp as glass. 01:07 lights flickered. Shadows jerked. For a second the crucifix on the wall turned its head toward me. Then still. 02:10 footsteps in the eastern corridor, scraping, dragging furniture. Security present, requesting permission to proceed. From the dark, denied, maintain current position. So I stood, notebook trembling, wrote 02:10 unauthorized presence, denied entry. 02:47 radio shrieked static. Morrow post east copy. Nothing. The hiss shifted into layered whispers. Too fast, too many. I swore I heard my own name in the noise. I logged, calm failure, interference, then counted. 15:16. The corridor doubled me. For every number I whispered, 2 echoes came back. 04:30 half an hour late the doors opened. Polish came first, Oxford's clicking fast. Document tonight as code 7. Mute marched next, silent, ignoring me. Last the barefoot group. Limping, smeared streaks of black-red across the marble. One hissed, successful evening. At dawn, Morrow arrived with pastries. He read my notes twice. You did well, he said. You remain neutral. What's a code 7? A disagreement resolved without permanent damage to facility or participants. That was resolved. Yes, he said. You'd know the alternative. Later, alone, I reviewed the entry 02:10. Eastern Corridor disturbance. Under my handwriting was a new line. Same pencil, same block letters, but I hadn't written it. Security observed breaking neutrality. My fingertip came away smudged with fresh graphite. The crucifix at the end of the corridor gleamed in dawn light. The carved head seemed tilted toward my post. Watching. That was the night I understood. The rules weren't just to keep me alive. They were part of the negotiation. And now someone, or something, was keeping inventory on me. By the time the 6th month rolled around, the rules had become second nature. I didn't even think about them anymore. They lived in my blood the way rifle drills do for a soldier. Eyes on hands and feet. Announce before entry. No contact. Speak only when spoken to. Count, count, count. And yet, even with the comfort of routine, the memory of the code 7 lingered like smoke after a fire. The corridor felt different, like the walls remembered. Father Morrow must have seen it in my face. He pulled me aside one evening before shift and said, "Neutrality isn't a shield, Tommaso. It's a blade. It cuts both ways. Wield it carefully." I didn't know what he meant, not then. That night I was told to report 1 hour earlier than usual. Special circumstances, Morrow said, his voice carrying that priestly calm that wasn't calm at all. I stood at my post at 23:00 sharp, coffee cooling in my hand, notebook already open. The storm from the code 7 had passed, but Rome was restless. You can hear it in the traffic, in the dogs barking at shadows they can't see. At 23:15 the heavy front doors creaked. The sound carried down the marble corridor like a warning. Footsteps followed, heavy, deliberate, the kind of steps that want you to hear them. When they came into view I froze. They weren't Polish, not mute. not strap, not click. These were new boots, tall, intricate leather buckles gleaming faintly even in the dim light. Metalwork stitched into the sides, patterns too precise to be decoration. They looked heavy, yet they made no sound at all. I announced, steady as always, "Security escort ready to proceed." The voice that answered was pleasant, cheerful, even. "Excellent. I appreciate punctuality in all its forms." We walked together down the silent corridor. My eyes stayed fixed on those elaborate boots. Exotic leather, almost reptilian. The buckles caught light that wasn't there. "You've been here some time now," the voice said conversationally. "Information not available," I replied. The special rule Moro had given me kicked in. If asked personal questions, deflect. There was a pause, then a laugh. Warm, polite, but threaded with something that didn't belong in a laugh. "Ah, they briefed you well. Refreshing." We reached Father Moro's office. I knocked 3 times, announced, "Escort complete." From inside, "Enter." I stepped aside, allowing the boots to pass through first. "Will you require escort back?" I asked. "I will call you when needed," Moro answered. The boots turned slightly as if to look at me, though I didn't dare lift my eyes. "Until then," the voice said almost kindly, "I returned to patrol." The first hour passed with normal arrivals. Polish came first, Oxford's shining as always. Mute marched in formation, ignoring me but radiating authority. Strap came last, carrying its storm scent. But all through the routine, my mind was on those boots in Moro's office. The way they seemed too perfect. The way their voice was too human. Lightning flickered. Lights buzzed. My radio hissed static, then cleared. I wrote it all down, but my pencil pressed too hard, almost breaking the page. At 00:30, my radio clicked alive. "Tommaso," Moro's voice strained. "Escort duty. Return to my office." When I arrived, Moro looked tired, his hand shaking around a glass of wine. The boot stood near the window, gleaming faintly in the candlelight. "Ready for escort," I announced. "Actually," the boot said cheerfully, turning slightly in my direction, "I have a proposal that might interest you." I froze. Rule 4, speak only when spoken to, so I waited. Moro sighed. "Tommaso, this individual wishes to make an offer. I have explained that you are under contract with the church, but they insisted." The boot stepped closer. The leather seemed to breathe. "Your reputation for reliability has reached certain circles. There are opportunities available that would triple your current compensation." The words hung in the air like incense. I kept my eyes down. "I am satisfied with my current position." "No doubt," the boot said smoothly. "Loyalty is admirable, but consider, the church limits you. So many rules, so much ritual. In other arrangements, men like you are given far more autonomy, responsibility, freedom." They paced slowly, boots whispering against marble. "The work is more interesting, the benefits substantial." I said nothing. Silence is armor. Finally I spoke. "Thank you for the offer, I decline." The boots paused, then chuckled. "No pressure, the offer remains, should your circumstances change." I led the way back to the main corridor. The boots followed, silent, steady. When we reached the door to the conference area, they stopped. "Before I leave," the voice said, cheerful still, "may I ask why you declined?" I forced the words out. "This work suits me. Rules create stability. I prefer stability." Silence stretched. Then the boots shifted. "You understand something most do not. Structure serves a purpose beyond control." Yes, Father Moro chose well. They entered the hall, the door shut. My hands trembled. I didn't write the tremor down. For the next 3 hours the meeting proceeded strangely calmly. Voices rose occasionally, but never like the code 7. The lights flickered, but never died. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the offer, about the word freedom. At 0400, the guests began leaving. Polish came first, pausing at my post. Your refusal was noted. Reliability includes resistance to compromise. Yes, I said. Mute left in formation. Strapped sandals squeaked against the wet marble, then the boots. They stopped directly in front of me. The buckles gleamed, catching non-existent light. You have chosen loyalty, they said. It will serve you well. But remember, stability is a rare commodity. Protect it. Then they walked on. After dawn, Morrow poured coffee, eyes heavy. You handled that perfectly. Such offers are not uncommon. The church appreciates your loyalty. I finally asked, what kind of work would they have offered? His gaze dropped. Less regulated gatherings, higher pay, far more dangerous. The rules that govern our meetings exist for good reasons. I nodded. I understand. Good. Expect additional compensation. Consider it recognition of your restraint. For weeks afterward, I thought about the boots. The way their voice offered temptation in such calm, cheerful tones, the way they already knew me, the way they said the offer would remain open. I kept counting during patrols, whispering numbers under my breath, watching the floor, watching hands and feet. But sometimes in the quiet between footsteps I heard echoes, a voice, pleasant and cheerful, whispering in my own cadence, freedom. On my next patrol, when I opened my notebook, I found a fresh line written in my own block letters. Consider the offer. I hadn't written it. The pencil marks were still warm. They put people with clipboards behind me. That's when you learn the rules aren't just for the guests, they are for you. The audit notice didn't arrive by email. It arrived as a folded sheet under my door, embossed with a seal I'd seen only once before on the red wax envelope from Part 6 that made the paper sweat. The heading read, Observational Review Special Events Program. Duration, 1 session. Personnel, Sister Margarita lead, lay auditors X2. Objectives, verify protocol adherence, collect stakeholder feedback, baseline environmental variance. Note, do not alter standard behavior in any way. That last line is the funniest thing you can tell a soldier. Telling me not to alter my behavior is the fastest way to make me hyper-conscious of every breath. I pocketed the notice, laced my boots, and recited the rules while I tied the knots. 1. Don't look at faces. 2. Announce before entry. 3. No contact, 2 meters minimum. 4. Speak only when spoken to with guests. 5. Never turn your back on more than one, count constantly. And the special ones now laminated into the muscle memory. No message carrying. Lanterns if electricals fail. Sulfur/burning metal equals evacuate. I added my private addendum, the Americanism I say to make a prayer sound like a joke. Don't get cute. Sister Margarita, black suit, hair tight as a bracket, met me in the side office with 2 lay auditors, both of the soft hands, sharp pencil variety. One introduced himself as Fabio, the other as Luca. Both had clipboards with gridded forms labeled OB14 and OB15. My notebook suddenly felt primitive. We will be behind you, Sister said, crisp, unblinking. We observe your adherence. We do not interact with stakeholders. She said stakeholders the way a good nurse says tumor, professional, not heartless. Ground rules, I asked. You apply yours, she said, meaning the 5. We apply ours. She held up a small handheld recorder. Permission to record. Your call, I said. Just no electronics get shy around midnight. She didn't smile. We expected as much. She produced a thin folder the color of a bruise. Tonight we will also collect feedback. From them, from anyone who chooses to provide it. She looked past me, through me. Do not solicit, do not interpret. Copy, I said. I clipped my pencil to my notebook, adjusted the radio, breathed once. The stone under my boots felt 10% too cold. We walked the lanes, the east corridor's veins, like a slow parade, me at point, sister dead behind, the clipboards a polite distance back. The crucifixes caught what little light existed and threw it grudgingly along the marble. I counted paces between the wall-mounted saints, 58, wrote it, underlined once. Fabio clicked his pen. You measure the corridor. I measure me, I said. The corridor measures itself. He looked at sister. She said nothing. Good auditors know when silence is data. The air zipped shut right on the stroke of midnight. First in, Polish, mirror-shine Oxfords, heels together, heels apart, pace unhurried but decisive. I felt the auditors lean forward in the way of people seeing an eclipse for the first time, fear in the stomach, curiosity in the eyes. Security present, I said, voice level, permission to remain. The Chicago voice, reliability persists, commendable. I didn't answer. Rule 4, speak when spoken to by them. Fabio's pen hovered, unsure whether to log the compliment under stakeholder feedback or anomalous dialogue. He ticked both. Good instincts. Polish moved on. Note cadence, sister said under her breath, but the recorder wouldn't hear it. Her whisper had the training to dodge tape. Mute arrived in formation. Boots that drank sound, a moving acoustic hole you feel in the bones of the ear. As they passed, Fabio lifted his recorder, tapped its mic, frowned. The little red LED died. The pen line on his form broke as if ink refused to cross a boundary. Zone of attenuated phonation, Luca whispered, proud of the phrase. Write it after, sister said, never taking her eyes from my shoulders. Don't look up. He wasn't looking up, he was looking at me. But it was a good reminder, audit or not, I carry the rule on behalf of the room. I counted loud enough for my own ears to assist me. 6, 7, 8. The corridor threw back nothing. The absence of echo is its own kind of noise. I wrote it in block letters, no return. Strap came with the soft squeak of oiled leather and the smell of ozone. As the sandals wound past, condensation trembled on the walls. A thin mist grew at ankle height. My calves felt a cold ring like a wedding band misplaced. Fabio's pen skated on damp paper. He wiped his clipboard with the back of his wrist. When he looked down, his wrist had a faint lattice of redness, as if the air itself had cross-hatched him. He kept writing. Professional. Security present, I announced for the third time. Permission to remain. A warmer voice than usual. Yes, good. Sister made a tiny diagonal slash on her OB14, stakeholder tone equals positive. She didn't label it that way, but I could feel the box tick. Auditors don't know your rules, they know theirs. That means they test yours, sometimes on purpose, sometimes by existing. At 00:47 we turned at the fountain. A guest stood there, gloves without creases, fingers too articulated, the surface of the material too perfect to be any material I recognized. I announced, security present, 2 meters, permission to remain. Fabio, curious and human, shifted left to get a better view. The sight line would have run straight up the guest's posture. Rule 1, mortal sin. I didn't touch him. Rule 3. I stepped to block, took his angle, filled the line of sight with my shoulder and the square of my back. Hold, I said, the command voice you use on ranges and in riots. Then softer, eyes down, hands/feet only. The guest turned its gloves toward sister. The fingers didn't fold so much as choose a new surface. Acknowledged, it said. We stood still exactly 4 heartbeats, mine not its. When it moved, the corridor uncoiled a fraction. Sister jotted 2 words I happened to glimpse when the page caught light, appropriate interpose. She didn't say good job, she didn't need to. The check mark warmed the room a degree. We set cadence. Pass, announce, count, note. Sister's recorder came back to life outside of Mute's shadow, catching my breath, catching the scratch of graphite. That's when Luca hissed, quiet but guttural. Signora. On his form, beneath his neat block letters, a second line had appeared, graphite charcoaling up through paper fibers like a bruise rising. Observer #2 breathes too loudly. He hadn't written it. The handwriting mimicked his but straighter, more patient. Beside it, a box checked feedback received. He turned the page over. The phantom line showed through as if the paper remembered being born with it. Eyes down, Sister said, and to her credit she didn't snatch the clipboard or clutch her crucifix. She simply wrote in her own margin, spont. Annotation, source, unknown, content, behavioral. The corridor, having had its say, continued. The brass dial ticked. I right arrow Roman 2, right arrow Roman 3, right arrow. The dot after the Roman 3 isn't a number, it's a decision. Doors slid open. Inside, antique mirror, floor to ceiling, silvering at the edges like frost in metal. I held my post 20 feet out, lantern ready, the way a cop holds the line at a parade. Sister and the auditors stood behind me, breath stacked like they'd practiced it that way. In the mirror, the corridor repeated. 3 figures, me, Sister, 1 auditor. It should have been 3. But the mirror returned 4. A second me lagged a half step back, head slightly tilted up, eyes not where they should be. Fabio sucked air. I felt it more than heard it, the mute's acoustic scar still sticky. The doors closed, the dial unmoored, up past numbers into the dot. A faint draft feathered my sleeves, my double didn't shiver. Sister's pencil moved without the scratch of graphite. Later I'd noticed the depressions carved the words anyway. Mirror offered a surplus. We'd barely cleared the elevator when a lay administrator, one I recognized from daylight, hurried up with a folded note. Not a guest. A man whose badge clipped to a belt said Arch. Archives Temp. Can you run this to Father Moro? He asked low. It's time sensitive. I didn't touch the paper. No message carrying, I said. Direct to clergy. Oh, come on, he said, old Catholic whisper forming a fist. It's just a room away. Direct to clergy, I repeated. Sorry. He huffed and hurried past, shoes squealing just enough to make everyone look up for a sin of a second. I planted my stance and recited the count, 12, 13. After he vanished, Sister said, level, pass. I nodded. A trap. A control, she said. The temptation to help is the temptation to interpret. And interpretation here gets you eaten. Polish re-emerged for a corridor break. He paused at my post, Oxford squared like parade rest. Reliability maintained, he said, noted with approval. Sister's pen ticked, heavy check mark feedback positive. Then from further down the hall, a whisper from no mouth. Partner breathes too loudly. My shoulders tightened. I'm alone, I said without meaning to speak. Rule 4 doesn't apply to the air. Luca checked over his shoulder. He's alone, he echoed, confused. Sister didn't look at us. She wrote, stakeholder identifies partner, anomalous co-present signature. Then underlined partner as if underlining fixes ghosts. I measured paces between crucifixes again. 58 on the way out, 62 on the way back, 65 after the fountain, 58 again at the elevator. Fabio, catching on, began to count his own steps. His lips moved, but no sound came. Mute hadn't reappeared, but their silence had left a residue, like a film on the marble that kept swallowing honest noise. His eyes widened. Sister tapped his clipboard with her pencil tip, one soft tick to bring him back from the edge where you map your own panic instead of the hall. We logged it all. Not because logging saves you, but because logging prevents you from doing the one thing that kills you here, looking for meaning in the moment. Meaning is determined in debrief, in daylight, with coffee and shame. In the corridor, the job is lanes, counts, distances, and breath. One of click bare feet, thick nails stumbled, not a dramatic fall, more a glitch in balance. Instinct, training, human decency, everything in me flinched toward help. 2 meters, no contact. My heel remembered before my hand did. I drew back a hair, creating distance without ceding ground. Medical, I asked, the one word allowed to bloom. No, came the reply. The voice doubled like a choir sung into a bottle. Sufficient. Sister recorded, guard withheld contact correct. Offered assessment verbally allowed. Stakeholder refused care. Luca added a red asterisk. In a normal workplace you'd call it CYA. Here it's liturgy. We reached the fountain on our final loop. Empty visually. A ring of water glowed like a thin halo on marble, the kind that shouldn't glow and did. I crouched, lantern held low, eyes on the ring, not the imagined face above it. In the ring a reflection formed, straps, sandals, high-laced, wet where nothing dripped. The pattern of the soul had changed again, wheat bending in wind shy of a storm. I didn't blink this time. I announced, voice barely a thread, security present, permission to remain. A breath of approval, warm, then nothing. The ring faded, leaving the acrid scent of hot metal cooled too fast. Sister's pencil flattened the word residual until it threatened to tear the paper. Departure ran like choreography someone had drilled into the bones of the city. Polish first, mute in formation, strapped with the smell of approaching weather, click limping, clicking, making prayers of their own against stone. As Polish passed, he said, audit observed, choose your auditors more quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was customer service with teeth. Sister inclined her head 1 atom. I thought she might be the bravest person I'd met in this job. Dawn made the statues outside blink. We gathered in the side office where coffee is both sacrament and sin. The auditors laid their clipboards on the table like offerings. Findings, Sister said. Protocol adherence, high. Deviation risk, low. Decision-making under test, pass. Fabio added, environmental anomalies recorded, corridor length variance, echo attenuation, mirror surplus. Stakeholder feedback, I asked, as if the word stakeholder doesn't make my teeth itch now. Mixed, trending positive, Sister said. 2 commendations for reliability. 1 complaint. I held her gaze, the breathing. Yes, a beat. We'll schedule you alone for the next 6 months. I frowned. I've been alone. She tapped a line on the OB14 I hadn't seen, coverage model, dual shadow. Someone had checked a box beside it, not me, not them. What's a dual shadow? I asked. Luca flipped a page, revealed indentations. The writing you can't see until you angle it to the light. Someone or something had filled the Observer 2 column whenever Mute had passed. Sister closed the folder. Operationally, you solo. Administratively, we remove variables. Which is a way to say we won't put language in a place language breaks. When they left, I opened my notebook. The grid had taken the night's markings like a field receiving footprints. Some smudged, some crisp, some I didn't recognize. Beneath my last entry, 0329, residual at fountain, A new line existed, graphite fresh enough to silver the page. Audit complete, pass. Recommendation, remove shadow, block letters. My style, but cleaner. I touched it with a fingertip. Gray dust ghosted my nail. In the window, the glass still caught the corridor's thin dawn. My reflection stood where it should. Then for an instant, no longer than a blink miscounted, the reflection lagged one half step and looked up. I didn't follow its eyes, I counted. 1, I said out loud. The corridor returned, helpful as always, 2. I walked home through a Rome that pretended nothing had happened, the way cities do when they are old enough to know better. In my pocket, my mother's Sacagawea dollar warmed, then cooled. The crescent scuff on the edge, the one that matched the Polish toe, caught skin. On my kitchen table, I spread the audit forms the way a medic lays out instruments. Across the bottom of OB14, in Sister's calm, hard pencil, a final line. Neutrality preserved, not equal to passivity. Asterisk, reliability observed, equal structure provided. I put the paper away. Rules don't love you back, but they can keep you. I slept until the light turned honest, dreamed of clipboards that wrote compliments in someone else's hand, woke to the certainty of the next 6 months, scheduled solo with an asterisk that meant you were never alone. I laced my boots for night 8, said the rules aloud until they were my voice and not words. Don't look at faces. Announce. No contact. Speak only when spoken to. Count. And under my breath, softer than a prayer, don't get cute. Somewhere in the corridor that hadn't opened yet, a pen I wasn't holding checked a box I couldn't see. Pass. The rules were meant to protect me. The sulfur rule was meant to save me. The night it activated, I learned what too late really smells like. The notice came on thicker stock this time, folded into thirds, sealed with a different wax, black, not red. It cracked like old bone when I opened it. Directive: be on site 2 hours early. Emergency lanterns and backup respirators staged. Maintain strict adherence to evacuation protocol if condition threshold reached. Condition threshold, not if sulfur arises, if. Father Morrow met me in the office, eyes hollow. We pray it won't happen, but we prepare. On his desk, a canvas bag with a manual lantern, a brass whistle, and a respirator mask older than me. Signal once if you evacuate, he said, twice if you are pursued. Pursued by what? He didn't answer. At 22:00, I walked the corridors, lantern unlit but ready. The marble underfoot felt colder than winter should allow. The crucifixes seemed damp. My notebook pages curled at the edges as if they wanted to fold closed before anything began. I recited the rules aloud, more for me than for anyone listening. Don't look at faces. Announce. No contact. Speak only when spoken to. Count. And the silent addendum breathed like a psalm, evacuate if sulfur. 23:45, Polish arrived early again. The Oxford shined harder than usual, like the polish itself sweated. You know what to do, the Chicago voice said. Yes, I replied. 0000, mute entered, boots absorbing even the thunder outside. The storm had returned, echo of Code 7. One paused. Maintain neutrality, it said. It will be tested. 0022, clicks scurried in, toenails frantic. The air felt humid around them, as though condensation came from their very skin. 0041, a new presence, leather heavier, dragging chains. No code name yet. I logged it, unfamiliar, chains audible. When the doors shut, the corridor exhaled wrong, like lungs filling with smoke. At 0112, the lights dimmed. Not flickered, dimmed steadily like someone lowering a rheostat. The air thickened, my nostrils stung. A tang of copper, sharp like coins, then beneath it burning metal. I froze, hand on the respirator. Not yet, wait for confirmation. At 0114 the copper faded, normal air returned. My pencil wrote by itself, slashing jagged across the page, not yet. I dropped the notebook, shaking. 0143 it came. Not faint, not questionable. A wave of stench rolled through the hall, thick as tar. Sulfur, rotten eggs, burning wire, sparks off an arc welder, all braided into one. It coated my tongue before my nose could decide. The crucifix nearest me wept condensation, droplets sizzling as they hit the marble. I yanked the respirator on, lantern lit with a crank. My voice cracked through the filters, initiating evacuation. I blew the brass whistle once. The sound carried, but wrong, it bent around corners, came back split into harmonies that weren't mine. I turned toward the nearest exit route, notebook clutched underarm. My boots echoed too loudly. The corridor had stretched again. 58 paces became 70, then 90. Behind me, footsteps, too many. The lantern light wavered, guttering against an invisible wind. My count faltered. 1, 2, 3. The echoes multiplied, racing ahead of me. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I forced my legs forward, lungs burning in the respirator. At 0155, the whistle left my lips again. 2 blasts, the signal for pursuit, because I heard it. Something wasn't just following, it was matching. Step for step, shadow for shadow. I didn't dare look back. My notebook vibrated in my hand. I risked a glance at the page through lantern glow. Words scrawled themselves in block letters I hadn't written. Do not turn. Count, count, count. I obeyed. Voice raw through the mask. 9091. The corridor bent longer still. Finally, the heavy side door loomed. Steel bolted, meant for fire escape. I shouldered it open. The air outside, wet Rome night, hit me like medicine. The sulfur cut instantly. The burning tang fled. I collapsed on the steps, lantern clattering. Whistle in hand, mask still on. I counted anyway to keep the echo inside me instead of around me. 1, 2, 3. Only my own voice returned. At dawn, Morrow found me slumped, notebook across my chest. He poured water from a flask, hands shaking. You blew the whistle twice, he said. Yes, pursuit. He closed his eyes, then it was close. He asked for my notebook. I hesitated, then handed it over. His brows knit at the fresh lines written in perfect block. You passed, this time. He closed the book gently as if it were fragile flesh. The protocol works, he said. But next time, Tommaso, next time, don't wait for confirmation. I walked home through empty dawn streets. My clothes still stank of sulfur, though no one else seemed to notice. When I unlocked my apartment, the respirator slipped from my bag. It hit the floor with a metallic thud. On its cracked glass lens, 5 words were etched as though burned in acid. Rules exist for a reason. I didn't etch them, but they were in my handwriting. It's one thing when words appear in your notebook. It's another when the notebook starts keeping a second copy you didn't authorize. I hadn't slept well since the sulfur night. The smell clung to my clothes for 3 wash cycles. Even when I sat in my kitchen at noon with sunlight across the table, I could swear I tasted copper. The notebook lay there too, silent. My own handwriting filled half of it. The other half was made of those phantom entries, block letters too steady, too patient. At first I told myself they were stress scribbles, subconscious tics, but then I noticed spacing. My natural block letters drift left when I'm tired. These were dead center, perfectly aligned. That morning, one phrase stared at me in graphite still fresh enough to smudge. Second copy ready. Father Morrow handed me a fresh replacement notebook before shift. Rotate it in, he said, as though it were ammunition or a spare magazine. I slid it into my breast pocket but kept the old one tucked at my hip. Something in me needed both. At 22:30, while patrolling the silent corridor before arrivals, I opened the new book. Crisp pages, grid sharp as razors. Then, without my pencil touching, words bled upward from the paper fibers. Entry mirrored. I checked the old notebook. Same line had appeared there too, graphite glimmering. For the first time, I wasn't seeing phantom words appear after I wrote. They appeared before. 23:55 Polish first, shoes sharp. Two notebooks, the Chicago voice said without preamble. Redundancy noted. Yes, I said. Do not allow contradiction, it added. The line burned into both notebooks simultaneously. Do not allow contradiction. My stomach twisted. At 00:37, click skittered past. Bare nails scratching frantic. I logged in the old notebook. 00:37. Click corridor pass. 3 individuals. In the new notebook the words appeared. 00:37. Click corridor pass. 4 individuals. I blinked hard, counted again. 3 sets of nails, 3 shadows against marble, but the new notebook insisted on 4. I whispered the count under my breath, desperate. 1, 2, 3. The corridor whispered back 4. At the fountain I risked it. Flipped both books open side by side, lantern beam across them. Old notebook, corridor length 58 paces. New notebook, corridor length 62 paces. I walked it, counted aloud. 58. The corridor echoed 62. The crucifix wept condensation. At 01:15 my radio crackled. Not Morrow, not static, my own voice repeating back entries from the new notebook. 01:15, guest in sandals, ozone smell. The problem was strap hadn't arrived yet. I slammed the radio off, but the words still appeared in the new notebook. Radio off, entry logged. The old notebook stayed clean. At 01:45 I decided to test the anomaly. In the old notebook I wrote, lantern steady, corridor empty. In the new notebook letters formed, lantern flickering, corridor occupied. My lantern guttered, my breath caught. Down the corridor silhouettes, too many, not guests, not the regulars. Thin shadows stretched long, all facing me, unmoving. I blinked, they vanished. Lantern steady again. The old notebook line stayed intact. The new one crossed itself out with dark graphite slashes. At 02:00, mute marched by. Silent boots, erasing echoes. One stopped. You are double now, the flat voice said. Decide which remains. I don't understand. You will, it said, and walked on. Both notebooks filled simultaneously. Choose one. At 02:27 the two books diverged completely. Old notebook recorded, meeting calm, voices low, standard duration expected. New notebook wrote, code 7 imminent, prepare evacuation. Which one was lying? I checked the hall doors. Muffled voices, calm, normal cadence. Then a crash, muffled but real, a scream in a language I didn't know. The new notebook scrawled in heavy black, code 7. The old notebook stayed blank as if refusing to admit it. For the first time the books began to fight. On the old grid, remain neutral. On the new, intervene. On the old, intervene equals death. On the new, neutrality equals irrelevance. My hand shook. I dropped the pencil. But the lines kept writing themselves across both pages, letters bleeding through paper onto skin. At 03:00 the conference doors burst wide. Guests spilled into the corridor earlier than schedule, moving fast. Polish strode up first, Oxford's clicking sharp. Guard the book's conflict, resolve them. I can't. You must. Click stumbled past, toenails tearing grooves in the marble. Mute marched tight, but their silence wavered, flickering. Strap left streaks of ozone condensation like tears. The new group, the chains, dragged metal that sparked. Both notebooks filled at once. Choose, choose, choose. I held the lantern in one hand, both books in the other. Which one do I keep? I asked out loud, maybe tomorrow, maybe to God. No answer came from the corridor. Only the echo of my own voice. Which one do I keep? The Oxfords paused. Reliability includes consistency, the Chicago voice said. Destroy one. The notebooks pulsed in my grip. The old one heavy, sweat-stained, mine. The new one clean, perfect, but filled with knowledge I hadn't lived yet. I made my decision. Threw the new notebook into the lantern flame. The pages screamed. Not paper tearing, screamed. Letters bubbled, black smoke pouring upward, smelling of sulfur. The corridor shuddered. Guests froze just for a heartbeat. Then silence. The old notebook in my hand stayed warm, graphite alive. On its page, one fresh line appeared. Choice accepted. At dawn, Morrow poured coffee, pale as death. He saw the scorched remnants of the new notebook in my bag, ash clinging to the seams. You chose, he said quietly. I burned the false one. False. His eyes searched me. Or future. I couldn't answer. In my old notebook, beneath the last entry, a new line had already appeared. Next copy ready. For years I survived by watching feet. Then came the night when the guest had none. Rome was heavy that evening. Not storm-heavy like a Code 7 night, not sulfur-heavy like the evacuation, but heavy in a quieter way. The city seemed to hold its breath. Father Morrow met me with a folder thinner than usual. One change, he said, a visitor without shoes. I frowned, barefoot. Not exactly. He slid the page toward me. The description was handwritten in older script, smudged ink. No footwear, no impression, no echo. Treat with standard courtesy. Do not attempt to categorize. I'd built my whole survival on categorization. Polish, click, strap, mute. Now they told me do not categorize. At 23:50 I took my post. Lantern ready, notebook open. The marble underfoot seemed polished to liquid. My pencil hovered over the grid, waiting to assign a name. But what do you write when the rule is do not label? Midnight struck. The main doors groaned open, hinges crying like wood under ocean pressure. Footsteps, normal ones, echoed in first, Polish, then the silence of mute. Then Ozone's tang with strap, then the frantic clicking, and then nothing, not silence, absence. The corridor went weightless. My ears strained for even the shape of noise. The marble looked unchanged, but my eyes watered as if a light too bright had passed. I announced automatically, security present, permission to remain. No answer, but in my notebook graphite etched itself, acknowledged. I whispered the count to steady myself. 9, 10, 11. But when the absence passed, my whisper stuck. No number came out. My throat worked, air moved, but nothing formed. The crucifix above me tilted forward a fraction, as if even carved would lean to hear. The auditors weren't there this time. No one else saw, just me and the notebook, vibrating faintly in my hand. At 00:37 during a patrol loop, I reached the Eastern Corridor intersection. Security present, requesting permission to proceed. A reply came, but not as sound. It appeared across both pages of my notebook simultaneously, block letters burned through graphite. Proceed. I stepped forward. The corridor stretched long, longer than usual, but without the wrongness of Code 7. Instead, it felt erased, like half the hallway had been rubbed out of existence and replaced with blank paper. At the far end, for a single blink, I saw it. Legs without feet. They ended at the ankles, tapering to clean nothing. And yet the figure moved. I blinked again. Empty hall. At 0110, the guests took their corridor break. I positioned myself at the fountain. Normally I watch the floor, track who leaves condensation, who leaves scratches. This time I saw condensation rings appear, circles of water, then vanish without any step to cause them. In my log 0110, presence indicated by absence. No impression. In the other margin, words appeared. Shadows count as feet. I looked up against my better judgment. Along the wall, lit by lantern glow, shadows of shoes passed, Oxford's boots, sandals, claws, and one shadow with nothing from the ankles down. At 0146, near the elevator, my radio clicked on. Not static, not Moro. A voice, mine but not mine, said, "Security, announce." I froze. "Security present," I said carefully. The radio repeated, "Acknowledged." The new notebook filled, communication verified. The old notebook remained blank. At 0215, I turned a corner and nearly walked into it. Not into it, into absence shaped like it. A man shape without detail, like marble missing a statue. I announced, voice steady though my chest wanted to run, "Security present, permission to pass." The absence tilted slightly, the way someone nods. My notebook wrote, "Granted." Then a second line below it, closer. I froze. Rule 3, no contact. I stayed rooted. My pencil snapped between fingers. After 10 long seconds, the figure stepped aside. The corridor darkened as though it had swallowed the lantern light. At 0240, Polish approached me during their return. Oxford's clicked sharp. They paused unusually long. The shoeless one spoke. The Chicago voice said, "Not in words. That is speaking enough. Do not answer." I didn't. Good, because if you do, it counts. Counts as what? No answer, only shoes clicking away. By 0300, my notebook began duplicating pages. The old one showed normal logs, times, patrols, standard incidents. The new one showed only one word scrawled across every page, "Closer." When I tried to close it, the old notebook flipped open by itself to mirror the same word. I clutched both to my chest like shields. At 0400, the guests departed. Polish first, then mute, then strap, then click. Finally nothing. The absence passed. The marble stayed pristine. The air grew sharp with copper. In my notebook, a final line appeared. "You kept distance." Approved. At dawn, Morrow read my report in silence. He lingered over the line about the absence, the voice without sound. "The shoeless visitor," he said quietly. "They arrive only once in a cycle." "What cycle?" "Longer than ours, that is all you need to know." He tapped my notebook. "You didn't answer." "No." "Then you live." On the walk home, I glanced at my reflection in a shop window. For the first time in years, I wasn't wearing shoes. I'd forgotten to lace them in my exhaustion. But in the glass, my reflection had shoes on, perfectly polished, and standing just behind me, another reflection, legs ending at the ankles. It raised a hand in silent acknowledgement. I kept walking. I didn't look back. The 5 rules kept me alive. The sulfur rule saved me once. But the night they handed me the Black Protocol, I realized rules weren't for survival anymore. They were for containment. 3 days before the meeting, I was called not to Morrow's office, but deeper, down a stairwell I hadn't used, past doors with locks older than nations. 2 men in plain clothes flanked me. guiding me into a room that smelled of candle soot and wet stone. Sister Margarita sat at the table, folder in front of her. The paper wasn't white. It was black, matte, heavy as slate. Words shimmered in silver ink. She pushed it toward me. "Tommaso, these are protocols you are not supposed to see." "Then why show me?" "Because last month you saw him, the shoeless visitor." I unfolded the pages. The silver letters seemed to resist light, writhing faintly when I tried to focus. Rules, numbered not in digits but in Roman numerals. If you perceive absence, announce anyway. Roman 2, do not attempt inventory, do not assign a name. Roman 3, if absence speaks, record but never reply. Roman 4, if your reflection diverges, continue patrol, do not engage. V, should absence touch you, blow the whistle once, then remain still until further notice. VI, never, under any circumstances, pray aloud. That last one froze me. Why? Sister Margarita's voice was flat. Because they listen when you pray. I arrived 2 hours early, carrying both my regular notebook and a new black-bound log. Moro met me with extra lanterns. "You won't need them," he said grimly, "but it will comfort you to hold light." The corridors felt different that night. Longer but not stretched, hollow like space missing between the walls. The crucifixes looked carved shallower, as though Christ himself had stepped back. Midnight struck, Polish first, the Oxfords paused. "You carry new rules." "Yes." "Do not test them." Mute marched next, boots swallowing echoes. One stopped. Shoeless returns. Strap came after, sandals wet with condensation. "Storm holds," it whispered. Click last, nails scraping feverishly. Then gap, not presence, not absence, something between. My notebook filled with silver scrawl, acknowledged. At 0027 near the fountain, condensation spread in rings wider than the basin. I announced, "Security present, permission to remain." No sound, only words across both logs simultaneously. You learn fast. The letters pulsed until I thought the page would tear. I wrote nothing in return. My pencil hovered, but my hand refused. The black notebook filled itself. Good. At 0053, Sister Margarita approached me quietly. "If absence escalates, you must trigger Rule V." "Which one?" She didn't look at me. "If it touches you, you whistle once, then freeze." "That's survival." "No, that's containment." At 0111, I checked the eastern corridor mirror. My reflection stood as expected, uniform, boots laced. But half a second later, the reflection leaned closer, lips moving. I couldn't hear it, but the black notebook caught the words, "Pray." Rule VI screamed in my head. Never pray aloud. I forced my voice into a count instead. 3132, the reflection grinned. My count echoed back as 3334. I walked away, throat raw. It happened at 0149. The corridor went colder, my breath fogged. Something brushed my hand, not skin, not fabric, nothing, but it carried weight the way emptiness itself leaned. The black notebook screamed across the page, "Contact." I dropped my pencil, raised the whistle, and blew once. The sound cut the corridor in half. Everything froze, guests mid-step, shadows halted, even condensation hanging in the air like glass. I stayed perfectly still. Seconds dragged like hours. Then the notebook scrawled, "Contained." The air released. The guests moved again. I still didn't breathe. At 0230, voices in the hall rose, not anger, not debate, chanting. Latin but twisted. I caught fragments, hostia, vacuum, silentium. Moro's radio crackled. "Do not engage, stay to your route." But the chanting grew louder until even the crucifixes vibrated. My lantern flickered, dimming to near dark. In the black notebook, breach near. I clutched it so hard my knuckles bled. Then, just as sudden, silence fell. The chanting stopped, the crucifixes stilled, on the page still safe for now. At 0405 the doors opened. Polish exited first, shoes hurried. Neutrality holds continue. Mute filed out in silent formation, their echo still swallowed. Strap dripped ozone into the marble. Click stumbled, nails scraping frantic prayers. And finally the gap. I saw nothing, but my notebook filled. Well done. See you next cycle. At dawn, Morrow read my black log silently, his lips pressed thin. They touched you. Yes. You blew the whistle. Yes. He closed the log gently. That's why we pay you. You are not just guard. You are anchor. I wanted to protest. I was just a man in a uniform, but my notebook scrawled one last line in silver ink. Anchor accepted. On the way home, I tried to throw the black notebook into the Tiber. I watched it sink. But when I unlocked my apartment door, it was on my kitchen table, dry, waiting. The silver letters across the cover gleamed in dawn light. The black protocol continues. For 11 months I was told the same thing: stay clear of the Eastern Corridor. The night the Eastern door opened, I learned why the rules exist at all. 3 days before the scheduled meeting, Father Morrow called me to his office. His eyes looked older than I'd ever seen them. "This month is different," he said. He slid me a folded sheet with the familiar Vatican seal. "You will be stationed at the Eastern Corridor." I froze. "That's off limits." He nodded. Until now. The paper had only one line written in heavy ink. Protocol: observe only, do not cross threshold. Beneath it, Sister Margarita had scrawled in pencil, if door opens, announce, record remain. At 23:45 I stood at the far end of the Eastern Hall. The crucifix there was different, wood cracked, eyes of Christ gouged faintly. The marble floor was unpolished, unlike the rest. My notebook felt heavier. The black log pulsed faintly in my pocket like a second heartbeat. I whispered the rules to myself. Announce, don't touch, don't reply, don't pray. And now the new one: don't cross. At midnight the main groups arrived in usual order. Polish, Oxford sharp paused at the turn. "You stand at East," the Chicago voice said. "Be steady." Mute followed, their boots swallowing the corridor's sound. One stopped, almost glancing my way. "Anchor," it said. "Strap." Dripping ozone. Click, nails frantic. And then silence. The air thickened. The crucifix above the Eastern door bled condensation. At 0027 I heard it, the sound of iron shifting. The door at the end of the Eastern Hall trembled. I announced, voice steady though my throat shook, "Security present, observing Eastern door." The notebook wrote by itself, acknowledged. The door stilled. At 0102, muffled voices seeped under the conference hall doors. Not argument, chanting. Latin layered with other languages I couldn't place. The Eastern door vibrated with each syllable. Dust fell from its frame. In my notebook, 0102, chanting correlates with door vibration. The black notebook scrawled over top, "They call." At 0133 it happened. The Eastern door creaked outward, stone grinding against stone. A draft rolled through, dry as tomb air, smelling faintly of sulfur and old iron. My lantern guttered. I forced the words out: "Security present, observing, permission to remain." On the page, "remain." The gap yawned wider. Darkness within darker than the unlit hall. I didn't cross, but I saw. Inside was another corridor, identical in shape but wrong. The crucifixes hung upside down. The marble looked wet, reflecting light that wasn't mine. And shadows moved there, feet without bodies, shoes without wearers, sandals dragging but with no legs attached. They walked in formation, echoing the guests inside the hall. At 01:41, Polish passed my post again, Oxford's gleaming. Simultaneously, in the eastern dark, I saw another pair of Oxfords, dulled, cracked, clicking out of sync. Mute marched past, and their shadows in the door corridor marched opposite. The silence doubled until my ears rang with absence. Click's nails scraped in both halls, one frantic, one dragging. Strapp's sandals dripped condensation here and sparks there. My stomach clenched. These weren't reflections, they were copies. And then it appeared again. The shoeless one. But this time there were two. One on my side, absence walking. One on the other, absence leaning closer, pressing against the threshold like glass. The notebooks filled together. Closer, merge. I blew the whistle once. The sound warped, cut in half, vanished into the door. The shoeless figure on my side froze. The one in the door grinned without a mouth. At 02:00, the chanting inside the hall peaked. The eastern door yawned wider. The marble under my boots cracked. The black notebook scrawled violently, breach near, hold anchor. My chest screamed to run, but I remembered Morrow's words, observe, remain. I planted my boots, voice cracking, security present, remaining, observing. The corridor shuddered, then stilled. The door stopped widening. At 03:15, the chanting fell silent. One by one, the guests returned to their departure routes. Polish paused, shoes sharp. You held. The door stays closed another cycle. Mute passed without sound. Strap left ozone trails. Click skittered, half falling. The shoeless one paused at my post. No words, only my notebook filled. Until next, then it faded. The eastern door shut, stone grinding shut with finality. At dawn, Morrow listened as I read my log. His face grew grayer with each line. You saw the corridor, yes. Then you understand why we don't cross. What is it? Not hell, not heaven. A negotiation space. If it merges with ours, the arrangement collapses. He folded my log closed. You held anchor. Remember this. The eastern door never opens without invitation. If it opens again, someone inside called it. That night at home, I flipped my old notebook open. The page where I'd logged 01:33 eastern door opens was blank. In its place, block letters. The door opens when you are ready. I shut the book fast. But from the corner of my room, I swore I heard hinges creak. My notebook talks back with graphite. The Vatican's ledger talks back with voices. The morning after the Eastern Door incident, Morrow didn't hand me coffee. He handed me a locked box. Inside was a ledger bound in cracked brown leather, older than any book I'd handled. Its pages were thick, yellowed, lined not in grids but in neat columns. Margins filled with notes in Latin, Italian, English. This, Morrow said, is the whispering ledger. I swallowed. Why give it to me? Because it started speaking your name. At first glance, it looked ordinary, an archival book, full of incident reports dating back decades. Some lines looked almost identical to mine, security present, permission acknowledged, corridor stable. But between them were darker notes like warnings. Do not allow the absence to tally higher than 9. Or, if sandals drip red, the cycle ends. I flipped further. A page was blank. Then, as I watched, words bled into the fibers. Tommaso Alberti present. My mouth went dry. At 23:45 on post, I opened the ledger under lantern light. The corridor silent, crucifix watching. The ledger whispered, not loud, not in my ears. Whisper in the bones the way your skull carries your own voice when you plug your ears. Security present, it murmured, my own phrase, I shut it fast. But my notebook, the black one, recorded without my hand. Ledger spoke. Midnight arrivals, Polish past, Oxford's clicking. You carry the ledger, yes. Then you carry weight, do not drop it. Mute paused, one boot lifted, then lowered without sound. It will whisper things not for you. Strap sandals squeaked damp. Ledger lies. Clicks nails scraped feverishly. Ledger tells truth. I wrote both down, lies, truth, contradiction. At 0027 the ledger began whispering faster. Words stacked over one another like radio static. Announce, remain, evacuate, anchor, pray. Rule VI slammed into my skull, never pray aloud. The whispers leaned closer in my bones, almost begging, pray, pray, pray. I gritted teeth, forced myself to count instead. 21, 22. The ledger hissed closer. My notebook filled itself, ignore. At 0105 I logged corridor length 58. The ledger wrote under it, in neat black ink, corridor length 62. I checked. My steps counted 58, but my lantern beam showed 62 crucifixes. Both were right, both were wrong. Ledger whispered, choose the longer. I refused. I underlined 58. The black notebook shook, then etched, anchor, hold short. At 0133 absence passed, the shoeless one, it paused, shadow falling across my boots. The ledger fluttered open on its own, pages rifling until one stilled. Words bloomed fresh, ask him. The whisper followed, curling inside my skull, ask me. I clenched the whistle, announced instead, security present, permission to remain. The absence tilted, then moved on. The ledger hissed in 3 voices at once, you failed, you passed, you live. By 0200 my sanity frayed. The ledger's columns wrote in real time, contradicting my own. Notebook strap condensation, corridor damp. Ledger strap sparks, corridor dry. Notebook mute formation intact. Ledger mute broken, one missing. I looked, formation intact. 4 boots, but shadows showed 3. Which one lied? At 0245 the ledger screamed silently. The whispers surged louder until they were almost words in the air. Right. The page blank, waiting. My hand moved without me. Pencil scrawled, I am here. My throat constricted. That wasn't my phrase. Lantern light flickered. Shadows leaned closer. The shoeless one paused again, whispering through marrow, yes, you are. At 0312 the ledger flipped to a page near the back. Fresh words bled through. Eastern door opens. Breach. But the door was closed, silent. Then hinges groaned faintly. Dust trembled from the crucifix. I shouted over my respirator, security present, remaining, observing. The black notebook etched violently, anchor hold. The ledger countered, anchor break. For one sick moment both felt true. At 0400 guests left. Polish paused, Oxford's gleaming. You carry too many books, the Chicago voice said. Books contradict. What do I do? Choose which one writes you. Mute marched silent, strap dripped, click skittered, the shoeless one faded, but as it passed the ledger closed itself. On the cover fresh letters seared into leather, you belong to both. At dawn Morrow poured coffee with shaking hands. You heard it, yes. What did it say? I hesitated. Everything, nothing, lies and truth. He closed the ledger gently. It was not meant to be read, only kept. Then why give it to me? Because it wouldn't stop calling your name. That night at home I hid the ledger under my bed, tried to sleep. At 0300 I woke to whispering. Not in the room, in my chest. The ledger wasn't under the bed anymore. It was on my chest, open, pages fluttering. Words crawled across in black ink. Next entry, your dreams. The first time I realized the rules follow you into sleep, it was already too late. I'd broken 3 before I opened my eyes. The whispering ledger didn't wait until night. At noon, it sat on my kitchen table like a patient animal and unfurled a single sentence across both open pages. Next entry, your dreams. I carried it to Moro the way you carry a newborn or a bomb. He didn't touch the leather. He used a cloth, slid it aside, and set down a folder with the same matte black paper I'd seen in the Black Protocol. Sleep is now operational terrain, he said. Do not take that as metaphor. Sister Margarita arrived with a second folder and an expression that meant she'd been arguing with people who wear rings and sign with seals. She opened to a page titled The Dream Protocol, silver letters that drank the light when I tried to focus. She read it like liturgy. Before sleep, copy the 5 rules by hand. Roman 2, turn all mirrors to face the wall. Roman 3, place a glass of salt water at bedside. Do not drink. Roman 4, keep the whistle within reach. If you blow it in a dream and wake with it in hand, remain still until dawn. If you dream the corridor, announce yourself. If the ledger appears, read only the current page. Do not turn. Romans 7. If you smell sulfur or burning metal during a dream, recite the count aloud. Do not pray aloud. Roman 8. If dawn is fixed at 4:59 a.m., hold anchor, do not move, do not speak names. Wait for the light to decide. I laughed once, the kind of dry American gallows laugh that sounds like you're clearing your throat. You expect me to remember all that half asleep. That's why you will write it, Sister said, sliding a legal pad and a pencil to me. Muscle writes before mind. Moro added a coin to the pile, my mother's Sacagawea $1. He must have taken it from evidence the day I turned it in for chain of custody. The crescent scuff on its edge winked like a tiny moon. Pinch this if the dream behaves like the corridor, he said. If it warms, you're inside it. If it cuts, you're awake. Good, I said. Pain is reliable. Not always, he said, like he knew something I didn't and had decided I shouldn't. I did what the protocol demanded. At 21:30, I copied out the 5 rules in block letters, English first. Then the Latin Moro had bullied into my mouth months ago. I turned my mirror to face the wall, set a water glass with 2 teaspoons of kosher salt by the lamp, and placed the whistle on the pillow like a stubborn little brass guardian. I wrote a heading on the legal pad without meaning to, Dream Log, Op Area, East Corridor. That wasn't confidence. That was resignation. I lay down with my palms on my chest like the dead in a catechism engraving, the coin between thumb and forefinger. It felt cool, ordinary. I let my breath count itself. In 4, hold 4, out 4, military square breathing, the only meditation I trust. I told myself the stupid American prayer I made up so it wouldn't count as prayer. Don't get cute. The ledger lay closed on the dresser. I hadn't invited it into the room. It came anyway. The last thing I saw before sleep is not a thing anyone else would consider a thing. The tiny motion of the ledger's leather, like breath under a heavy blanket. I woke up inside a corridor that wasn't my corridor and knew it in my bones. The marble was a shade too bright, the crucifixes a little shallower, as if carved by a hand that had been told what a crucifix should look like but had never seen a man die on one. I remembered Rule V of the Dream Protocol and announced without thinking, security present, permission to remain. The echo returned correctly, my voice coming back as mine, no doubling, no swallow. For a second I felt absurdly proud, the way a recruit feels when he nails his first inspection salute. Then the ledger drifted into view, carried not by hands but by the decision of the dream. It opened to a single page, blank. The saltwater glass stood beside it, brimming, beadlets trembling on its rim like nervous thoughts. "Stay on the page," I said, as if saying it to myself would keep my hands from turning. I have never trusted my hands. I counted to 10, a child's trick I've made into a habit. I didn't touch the page. The ledger wrote without me. Good. My coin warmed between my fingers. Not burning, not cutting. Dream, then, operational. A pressure front moved down the hall, and I knew even here what it meant. Strap. The smell of ozone whispered from nowhere. The condensation that usually purls in the real corridor began to form and then slid away, not falling, not evaporating, refusing to cling. "Security present," I said. "Permission to remain." Yes, the air wrote because the air had learned to write. Good. Then Polish arrived, mirror-gloss Oxfords, except the mirror showed nothing. No me, no ceiling, no opposite wall, just a glaze of black where there should have been continuity. "Reliability persists," said the Chicago voice, but the vowels were slightly wrong, like an actor misremembering a Midwestern accent from a movie. "You're not him," I said, forgetting for a heartbeat that the rule about speaking exists for reasons that aren't social. The ledger wrote across the margin like a reprimand, "Speak only when spoken to." But the Oxfords didn't punish me. They paused the exact length of a handshake. "Correct," they said in a voice that was more my voice than Chicago's. "Not him, here enough." Mute followed, or a map of them. Their boots swallowed not sound but color. The black and white of the corridor compressed toward charcoal as they passed. Clicks scurried, nails too long, too clean, ticking out what could have been Morse or could have been the skeleton's version of rain. I kept the count under my breath. 1, 2, 3. The corridor gave me my number back as letters. ONETWOTHREE. It felt like being corrected by a teacher who resents you for trying. The ledger's page began to darken at the edges. Not burning, tarnishing, as if breath itself were sulfur. The smell came in behind it, first copper, then the rotneg throb that means get out now in every language on earth. "Count," I told myself, and I did, louder. The whistle sat under my cheek like a tooth, keeping me honest. I did not pray. In the deep wiring of my throat, a word tried to form, "Pater," and I bit it off so fast I tasted blood. The ledger wrote with relief I could feel, like a draft. Good. The sulfur thinned to the copper taste of pennies. I made a note on the pad beside the bed that was also somehow in my dream. Copper precedes sulfur by 12 slow breaths. It felt like a scientific discovery. It was probably superstition. The mirror I had turned to face the wall in my apartment hung at the end of the dream corridor, turned outward, beaming a clean, impossible reflection. The real hall, not this one. In the reflection, I stood where I should stand. Except the version of me it returned wore the black notebook like a badge pinned to his chest. His lips moved. I couldn't hear the words. The ledger heard them fine. It scratched in indifferent capitals, "Pray." I recited the count louder. 31, 32. The reflection smiled with all his teeth. "Pray." I blew one silent breath over the salt water, the way my grandmother had when she unkinked a baby's fever. The surface stilled. The reflection's smile cooled, became professional again. I kept walking. The shoeless one came without ceremony. No shadow, no weather, no smell. Only the feeling you get when you're sure you've forgotten a name and it's on the other side of a door you can't open. It stood, or existed, at the fountain ellipse and wrote across the glass with nothing. Closer. The protocol's Rule Roman 3 from the black set gripped my shoulders like a drill instructor. If absence speaks, record but never reply. I hear you, I said, immediately breaking the spirit if not the letter. Security present, permission to remain. Good, wrote the ledger, impartial as air traffic control. The absence tilted. In the water of the fountain, the reflection it didn't cast stepped nearer. The surface bulged, not up but down, as if under weight. I put 2 fingers on the whistle and the coin in the other hand. The coin warmed. Dream. The whistle's metal was cold, fogging my knuckles with dream breath. Pray, wrote the mirror. Closer, wrote the absence. Count, wrote the ledger. I counted. I didn't move. The shoeless one did something that felt like a nod, and the world resumed its room temperature. A lull that wasn't a lull moved down the hall. In it, the ledger did what the ledger does when it wants to own you. It turned a page by itself. I grabbed its cover like a man snatching a child back from traffic and held it closed. No. The ledger wrote across the exterior leather, letters embossing upward from within. Good. Don't make me do that twice, I said to a book, to a city, to myself. Rule VI thrummed in my blood, do not pray aloud, and I heard the ambush inside the impulse. I swallowed it. Silence is armor here. Silence is sometimes all you have. Time thinned into the kind of dream logic soldiers know from long watches and longer nights. Nothing for an hour, everything inside a minute. And then the minute arrived. My watch, yes, the Casio in my dream, ticked to 04:59 and stopped, not from battery but from decision. The corridor's light took on the particular gray that belongs to 5 in the morning in Rome, when bakeries wake and scooters remember they are loud. It held there like a cord. The dream protocol's last rule unrolled in my head as if Sister had stitched it directly into the muscle. If dawn is fixed at 4:59 a.m., hold anchor. Do not move. Do not speak names. Wait for the light to decide. I became furniture. The exact pose of a man holding a hallway occurred to me, a stance like doors would choose if they owned legs. I stood in it. Polish appeared in the pause, Oxford's immaculate, and stood too, heels together like a photograph of courtesy. Mute occupied the air where sound should be and froze there, statues of absence. Strap hung humidity like curtains that refused to fall. Click held mid-step, nails 1 millimeter above marble, the threat of a click more dangerous than the sound. The shoeless one did not appear. That was almost worse. The ledger wrote nothing. The page went blank from the edges inward, as if erasing itself very carefully. I did not move. I did not say any name, even my own. I counted silently. When you spend years on ranges, you learn to count with your ribs. 1 rib at a time expanded, then made room. At some number my body knew and I didn't. The watch ticked. 05:00. The corridor breathed. A single building-sized exhale. The ledger returned its lettering from wherever it had gone. The salt-water glass gathered its beadlets again as if to celebrate by sweating. Anchor held, it wrote, and allowed itself a period which counts for confetti around here. I woke with the whistle in my fist and the coin welded warm to my palm. The legal pad beside me held a page I didn't remember writing because I hadn't. The handwriting was mine, like a good forgery is yours, correct in its errors. Dream log 14. Corridor. Derivative but operational. Dawn fixed at 04:59. Held anchor. Ledger attempted unauthorized page turn. Denied. Prayer request repeated by reflection. Denied. Saltwater stable. Note. Names attract. I rolled out of bed and put my feet on the floor carefully, the way you do when you believe in minds. The mirror I had turned to the wall overnight was facing out again. Steam. Where had steam come from? Fogged its surface as if my apartment had decided to grow a breath. A finger had written in the fog in blocky schoolroom script. Yes/no only. It faded as I watched. A medium forgetting it had been a message. The salt glass was half empty. I didn't drink it. I know that the way I know my own name. Morrow listened to the whole report like a priest who has heard everything and still respects how hard it is to say it the first time. Sister took notes that didn't scratch. When I mentioned the 0459 hold, her jaw unclenched a notch I hadn't seen relax since I met her. You honored the last rule, she said. Good, that one costs the most when broken. What happens if I move? I asked, not because I intended to, but because knowledge here is the least bad risk. Time listens, she said, and when you move it negotiates with a different party. Which party? You don't get to know, Morrow said softly. He pushed coffee to me like absolution. You get to stand. His sister slid a thin card across the table, laminated of course. Dream protocol abridged. Copy the 5. Turn mirrors, salt glass, whistle reachable. Announce. Read only this page. Count, don't pray aloud. If 0459 anchor. On the back in pencil, a note in her hand that wasn't for the file. If the shoeless one writes closer, do not answer with movement. Answer with count. I tucked the card behind my badge where only I would touch it, a dozen times a night without meaning to. On the way home, Rome did what Rome does. Pretended it had seen none of this and carried on feeding people and honking at scooters who deserved it. In a bakery window, a boy sat on a flour sack playing chess with his grandfather. The board was set wrong, white on a dark square, but the old man didn't correct him. He let the continuity break and then made it work anyway. In the glass of the window, my reflection paused. Behind me, the shoeless one raised a hand, not a threat, not a greeting, an instruction. I didn't turn. I pressed the coin's crescent edge into my thumb until it almost cut and said the only prayer I could say without breaking any rule. 1, 2, 3. The city let the light decide. Somewhere behind me, a page turned itself back. For years, the rules kept me alive. One night, they made me read them aloud, not just for myself, but for the world. The notice wasn't paper this time. It was written across the mirror in my quarters, fogged in block letters. Next, arbitration, prepare. I didn't write it. I couldn't erase it. When I reported to Morrow, he looked at me like a man reading his own obituary. You've been chosen, he said. The guests want arbitration. Over what? Over everything. Sister Margarita handed me a sealed folder, black paper, silver ink, the same as the dream protocol. The header read, the arbitration procedure. Rules beneath. I arrived 2 hours early. Roman 2, carry both notebooks. Do not choose until commanded. Roman 3. When requested, recite the 5 rules aloud exactly. Roman 4, do not add, do not subtract. Errors will be interpreted as judgment. V. If time halts at 4:59, continue reciting until released. VI. If asked whose side you serve, answer neutral. I close the folder. And if I refuse? You can't, Morrow said. They already wrote your name. At 22:00, I took position in the eastern corridor, both notebooks heavy in my coat. The crucifix above the door was cracked deeper than last time, wood nearly splintering. My coin felt hot before anything started. That had never happened before. The whistle I set against my chest as if it could remind my lungs to work. Midnight, Polish first, shoes gleaming sharper than moonlight. You will read tonight, the Chicago voice said. Clarity matters. Mute boot swallowing sound. Anchor speaks. Strap, sandals dripping condensation in patterns almost like script across the marble. Click, nails frantic, too many clicking out rhythms like verdicts. And finally, absence, the shoeless one. It paused at the fountain ellipse and words bled into both notebooks at once. Begin. The eastern door opened wider than I'd ever seen. Not just a corridor this time, an entire hall, dark, crucifixes reversed, candles burning with blue flame. Benches lined the walls, empty but humming as if bodies had only just left them. In the center, a dais of marble, and there, on it sat a chair. I knew it was for me. I walked to it slowly, counting under my breath. 1, 2, 3, the number steadied my bones. The shoeless one waited, absence leaning closer. Polish stood to my right, mute behind, strap left, click circling. The air itself became jury. The shoeless one wrote into the air, letters forming in condensation and smoke. Recite. My throat constricted, I forced breath. Rule 1, never look directly at their faces, eyes on hands or feet. The corridor seemed to nod. Rule 2, always announce yourself before entering. Wait for acknowledgement. Shadows leaned closer. Rule 3, no physical contact under any circumstances. Maintain 2 meters. A ripple passed through the benches, like approval or warning. Rule 4, speak only when spoken to, yes or no only. The ledger fluttered in my coat pocket, pages twitching like wings. Rule 5, never turn your back on more than one at a time, count constantly. The shoeless one wrote, good. Polish stepped forward, Oxford's gleaming, voice sharp. Whose side do you serve? I remembered Rule VI of the arbitration folder, answer exactly. Neutral, I said. The hall groaned, stone shifting. Mute's boots absorbed the echo, silence swelling. Neutral. Strap's sandals dripped, condensation spelling the same word across the marble, neutral. Click's nails tapped it too, neutral. The shoeless one didn't move. The absence only wrote approved. At 0200, the whispering ledger dragged itself from my pocket and opened. Its voice didn't whisper this time. It shouted in bone and marrow, add Rule 6. I froze. There was no Rule 6 in the original 5. To speak one would break the protocol. The black notebook shook violently, scrawling, do not add. The ledger wrote louder, add or fail. The shoeless one tilted, absence leaning closer as if listening for my choice. I gripped the whistle but didn't blow. My coin cut my palm, sharp enough to remind me anchor. I repeated the 5 only, word for word, without a 6th. The hall screamed silence. My ears rang. Then the shoeless one etched into air, consistent, reliable. The ledger slammed shut. At 04:59, time stopped. The candles froze mid-flicker. Polish halted, Oxford's glinting without motion. Mute mid-step, silence like a knife. Strap's condensation droplets hung in air, unmoving. Click's nails hovered, unstruck. The shoeless one froze with its absence inches from my face. My watch read 4:59. The protocol screamed in my skull, continue reciting until released. I spoke the 5 rules over and over, voice hoarse, throat raw. 1. Never look at faces. 2. Always announce. 3. No contact. 4. Speak only when spoken to. 5. Never turn your back. I recited them until my ribs burned, until my voice cracked blood. At last 05:00. The candles guttered, time staggered forward, the shoeless one receded. The benches groaned one last time, verdict reached. Polish approached, Oxford steady. Neutrality upheld, arbitration complete. Mute silence sighed like relief. Strap dripped one last line across marble, continue. Click skittered frantic but slower now, like satisfied punctuation. The shoeless one wrote only for now. The eastern door slammed shut. At dawn, Morrow sat pale, sister scribbling furiously. You recited only 5, he asked. Yes, good, the ledger tested you. If you had added, we'd have lost jurisdiction. Jurisdiction over what? He didn't answer. Sister finally spoke, voice thin, over everything. At home, I set both notebooks on the table. The black one stayed still. The whispering ledger cracked open by itself, one phrase written across both pages. Next time they may not accept neutral. I closed it with shaking hands. But in the window, my reflection smiled like it already knew the words I would speak. Dawn usually saves us. The morning it didn't, time held its breath at 4:59 and tried to pull the world in half. The message arrived on the brass of my whistle, etched along the curve like a jeweler who'd run out of rings. Breach window, dawn, anchor kit required. I didn't etch it, the letters were mine anyway. When I reached Father Morrow's office, Sister Margarita was already there, black suit sharper than sleep. No coffee, black folder, silver ink. Arbitration bought us one cycle, she said. They're going to test the seam at dawn. The seam, where our corridor and the eastern one meet the clock. Morrow set a canvas satchel on the desk between us, anchor KIT in block stencil. Inside, a manual lantern with a hand crank, a shallow tin of coarse salt, a small handheld mirror with its back painted matte black, a length of red twine, a brass key on a leather thong, and a single page of laminated instructions. A1. Announce containment. A2. Draw salt line at threshold, do not cross. A3. Mirror faces wall. A4. Tie red twine from crucifix base to floor eyelet. A5. Lantern on low, no strobing. A6. Whistle once if touched, twice if pursued. A7. If 4:59 persists, recite 5 rules until release. Do not add. A8. If shoeless writes, choose. Answer with neutral and continue the count. Morrow added my mother's Sacagawea $1 to the pile without comment. I didn't ask how he kept getting it back when I swore I'd put it away. He looked tired in a way priests don't let themselves look in public. Dawn is going to stall, he said. You've done the 4:59 hold before. This time it will try to bargain. With who? With you, sister said. At 22:30 I walked to the eastern corridor alone. No auditors, no backup. The crucifix over the eastern door had cracked again, hairline fissures threading down the wood like veins drawn by a nervous artist. The marble at the threshold had taken on a dullness that wasn't wear. It looked unpolished by choice. I set the kit down and worked the steps like clearing a room. Announce. Security present, initiating containment. Salt. A straight line across the threshold, coarse grains clicking like small bones. Mirror turned to face the wall, then covered with my spare hand towel. Twine, tied from the crucifix's base to a floor eyelet sunk into the stone. The string made a straight, absolute line, the visual version of a law. Lantern, crank, steady, low, no pulse. Whistle, cord around my neck. Coin in my palm, crescent scuff against thumb. If it warmed, I was inside. If it cut, I was awake. The whispering ledger waited on the windowsill like a patient cat. The black notebook rode my chest like a badge. I told them both quietly, not tonight. They don't listen, but sometimes they pretend to. I copied the 5 rules by hand on a fresh page, slow enough to remember what each one cost me. Midnight. Corridor flexed like a muscle. Polish arrived first. Oxford's mirror bright, clicking the way good heels click when they want to be counted. You will be urged to choose, the Chicago voice said, crisp. Structure is a side, wear it. I didn't answer. The ledger wrote for me neutral structure. The air chose to accept both. Mute followed, boots swallowing sound and my pulse just long enough to remind me that hearts make noise too. Anchor speaks, one of them said, voice flat enough to pour. I announce, I replied, nothing else. Strap rolled a pressure change through the hall. The ozone smell under my tongue stung sweet, wrong like candy you know is medicine. Storm inland, the sandals whispered, tie your line tight. Click skittered, nails frantic, scratching Morse that wasn't Morse. I caught TRU, then it broke into noise. Behind all of them, absence. The shoeless one arrived not as a shape, but as a reminder. The salt line dusted itself, grains vibrating toward the threshold like iron filings. Begin, the black notebook wrote. The ledger echoed in older ink, began. The eastern door wasn't open, not yet, but the hinges breathed. If you've ever put your ear to a sleeping animal and felt it decide to wake, you know the sound. I announced, security present, observing eastern door. My voice sounded smaller than usual. The corridor didn't return the echo. Mute's residue ate it. The shoeless one wrote into condensation that wasn't there. Count. I did, out loud, steady, numbers like sandbags. The whispering ledger cracked itself open without my permission. It flipped 3 pages and then one back, respectful of its own drama. Add Rule 6, it wrote in clean, priestly hand. The black notebook smeared a no across the page so hard graphite dust lifted. Not tonight, I told both of them. Not ever. Even speaking that much felt like gambling. Rule 4 is the only one that looks small and isn't. Prudent. The shoeless one scratched into the lantern glow. I didn't answer. Bells somewhere far in the city measured quarters I didn't believe. The corridor smelled faintly of copper, then nothing, then copper again. Sulfur stayed away like a dog that knows the fence is electric. I walked lanes, counted, didn't look up. When the fountain gleamed, I took it as a promise and not a trap. At some point I held the coin and forgot I was holding it. It warmed. I didn't drop it. If the dream rules bleed into waking, let them. They're the only rules that haven't lied to me yet. The hinges of the eastern door whispered. The line of twine tightened, humming a note I felt in the bridge of my nose. The salt line's grains clicked against each other like small teeth. I announced again. Security present, remaining, observing. Remain, the black notebook wrote. The ledger, older and more cruel, added, remain until you are asked to leave. I know, I said. I didn't. Polish returned on a corridor break. Oxford's precise as metronomes. Recitation may be required, the Chicago voice said, because clarity is their version of mercy. Mute paused just long enough to remove the noise of my breath, which helped. Strap left condensation in the shape of a print I recognized. My own boot sole, worn down on the outside edge from 10,000 miles of attention. Click ticked out a steady line of what? A heartbeat pretending to be code. The shoeless one spelled only one word against my salt line, grain by grain lifting and settling until the letters existed. Choose. I answered in the only grammar that keeps me. Security present, neutral, initiating count. Because announcing the decision is the decision. The letters collapsed into a small dune and then smoothed themselves without touch. Time stopped. The second hand on my Casio stuck straight up with preacher certainty. The corridor froze the way dancers freeze when the lights fail. Candles in the eastern dark held their little tongues of flame like memories. The crucifix above the door didn't move. Its shadow did. The dream protocol rang in my bones. If 4:59 persists, recite the 5 until release. Do not add. So I recited, again and again. The words had the taste of pennies, the sound came back wrong as if I were being overdubbed by someone who could do a better impression of me. 1. Never look at faces. 2. Announce, wait. 3. No contact. 4. Yes or no only. 5. Count, don't turn your back. Polish stood to my right, mute behind, strap left, click flanking in little nervous circles. The shoeless one leaned close enough that my eyelashes felt colder. Recite, it wrote. I kept reciting. Nothing moved, the watch held. The ledger tried its trick again, add rule 6. The black notebook trembled out a no that shook the red twine. Not tonight, I said, and then corrected myself into the only phrases that count here. Yes, no. My throat began to go raw. I took the salt tin and, still reciting, drew a second line behind the first, a double bar. I set the handheld mirror face down, back to the wall, cover over it. I tied a second length of twine parallel to the first, a rail line in red. These are not sacraments, they do not save. They tell the corridor what shape to be. Everything here is about shape. The shoeless one spelled closer again, deliberate as handwriting lessons. I lifted the whistle and didn't blow. The absence pressed to the salt line and did not cross. The grains did not move. The line held. The world held. 3, I said, voice going. 4, 5. You learn in drills that numbers can be a wall. I built one number at a time. The eastern door opened half an inch without moving. I don't have better words for it. Space changed its mind and decided 2 doors were the same door. In the dark beyond, the hall with the upside-down crucifixes and the wrong light leaned toward us like a mirror smeared with another person's breath. From inside that wrong hall, a pair of Oxfords flickered into being, mine and not mine, cracked instead of polished, hurried instead of deliberate. Mute silhouettes came in threes. Straps sparked instead of wetting the stone. Click bled instead of ticking. The shoeless absence on that side wrote merge, letters made of cold. I put my coin flat on the stone between the twin salt lines and pressed it into the marble with my thumb until it hurt enough to remember other hurts. The crescent scar caught the lantern glow. Security present, I said, and surprised myself with how calm I sounded. Anchor holding. Polish's voice from my side said, structure is aside. Neutral, I answered. Then, because this is how you choose without saying what you're choosing, I follow the rules. The wrong hall buckled barely. The candles in that place went long and then short again. The Oxfords on that side lost a little of their hungry hurry. The shoeless absence wrote judge. I recited the 5 again. I did not add. I did not subtract. I did not elaborate. If judgment lives in addition and subtraction, then obedience is the one place where the scale breaks. I didn't hear the bell. It happened in the bones, not the ears. The watch ticked. 0500. The corridor took a breath so complete it felt like lungs I couldn't see had found air they didn't deserve. The eastern door decided to be closed. The wrong hall unleaned. The candles there became somebody else's problem. The salt line quit trying to be letters and went back to being a line. The coin cooled under my thumb. The shoeless absence receded an inch, too, then a stride that wasn't a stride. Before it folded entirely, it wrote on my black notebook in my hand while the notebook was still shut. For now, Polish nodded once, Oxford's in regulation approval. Mute unmade their own silence. Strap left the ghost of rain in air that didn't fall. Click finally let itself click, one single tick like a period. At dawn, the office smelled like an empty church, candle smoke and questions. Morrow scanned my notes, lips moving over words that weren't prayers. Sister read the laminate at my elbow as if checking we hadn't invented a new rule by accident. You didn't add, she said. No. You didn't cross. No. You chose, Morrow said, and it wasn't a question. Neutral, I said, and then, because I had to be more honest than that, structure. Sister slid a new card across the table, anchor, dawn, contingency. It was essentially what I'd done, cleaned up into words that can live in a folder. Morrow set a heavier envelope beside it. Compensation I didn't ask about because money is the least strange currency we spend here. Senior Security Coordinator, Special Events, he said, if you accept. The whispering ledger, uninvited, opened itself and wrote across both pages like a signature line, acceptance recommended. The black notebook wrote YES. Then, as if remembering Rule 4, scratched it out and left the page clean. I accept, I said. It felt less like a promotion than a sentence I'd already served. Sister's mouth softened half a millimeter. We'll brief the other sites. What you did will be templated. Polish would approve. Reliability scales. When I got home, I set the coin on my kitchen table and watched it until the sun found it. The crescent scuff was deeper than before, like it had scraped something harder than marble. I went to the sink to wash the salt from my hands, and when I came back there were 2 coins on the table. One with the old scuff. One with the scuff pressed twice. The mirror over the stove, turned to the wall last night, was facing out again. In it, the eastern door showed, sealed by a hair-fine line shaped exactly like a crescent moon. The whispering ledger lay open where I hadn't left it. 3 words in clean black ink. Breach averted. This time. I turned the mirror to the wall and put both coins in my pocket because I don't know which one belongs to me anymore. I laced my boots for the next shift and copied the 5 rules on a new page like a recruit who knows repetition is the only spell we're allowed. Don't look at faces. Announce. No contact. Speak only when spoken to. Count. Then, softer than breath, the one I add for myself, which doesn't count as prayer and might be the only thing that keeps me. Don't get cute.